Hey, Spinks from QuietKat, and in this video we're going to unbox and assemble our Apex hardtail bikes. This is going to be the same process for our Apex and Warrior models. So the first thing we'll do is go ahead and get the tape off the box. Be careful, there are some staples in here, so you want to mind that as you're opening it up. And we'll go ahead and get the box open here. Now once we have it opened up, we can go ahead and reach inside and remove some of these loose packaging pieces. For example, the cardboard wheel dividers. Set those to the side. There's one in the front, one in the back. I'm going to reach down in the bottom towards the front of this box and grab the accessory package. And on our Apex and Warrior models, you're going to find that in this nice graphic logo box. We'll just go ahead and set that aside for now. That's going to have our pedals, our charger, and some of our assembly tools in it. So next we'll dive in and pull out our battery. Batteries should be wrapped in foam, or it might be in a cardboard box. We'll set that aside. And it looks like that's everything. Next, we're going to take the bike up and out of the box. This can be a two-person operation, so if you have someone else that can help you lift it out of the box, that can make it a little bit easier. And so through the power of TV, let's go ahead and get this thing up and out of the box. So now that we've got the bike out of the box, we can go ahead and remove the zip ties and the packaging. So we'll grab our cutters. And one thing I like to do is place the cutter between the zip tie and the foam so that you don't have a risk of scratching the bike with your cutters. We'll go ahead and snip off these zip ties and discard them. There's a few of them on the front wheel, so I want to start there by getting the front wheel disconnected from the rest of the bike. We'll set the front wheel off to the side for now, and then proceed with removing the rest of the packaging. Be careful when clipping this top one, as the handlebars are attached. We just want to make sure that they don't swing and scratch or damage the bike. So now that we've removed all the packaging, we can go ahead and place the bike into a stand. If you don't have a stand, it's not a big deal. You can do the rest of this stuff on the ground just fine. So we're going to make sure that the bike is securely in the stand. These bikes are a bit heavier than your traditional mountain bike, so you want to make sure that everything's nice and secure for safety. Next thing we'll do is install our handlebars. In order to do that, we're going to remove the 4 bolts from the stem cap. That way we can put the handlebars into place. So using your 4mm hex key, you're going to go ahead and remove all 4 bolts. Give them a spin, set them aside. Next, we're going to take the handlebars, we're going to lift them up, and then we're going to mind exactly where our cables and our controls are going. So our shifter is going to be on the right-hand side. That's going to be for the rear shifting. Our electronic controls are on the left side. What we want to do is line up the display so that it is right in the center of the bars. You can use the yellow lines to align that center there. And then we're going to place the bars onto the stem. The stem's right between the bracket that's holding the display on. And we'll go get that pretty close to center. We don't need to have it perfect right now. We'll fine tune that in a little bit later. So once we get that in just by hand, we're going to get the first bolt started. Very gently. We want to make sure we don't cross thread this. It should go in nice and easy. We'll just get one a little bit in there just to hold things in place. Now the second one, we're going to go diagonal of that. Get that one lined up and into place. And the reason that we go diagonal is so that we make sure that we have an even clamping on the handlebar. So the space at the top and the bottom between the stem cap and the stem should be equal to make sure that we're getting a nice even clamp. So this is a good time before we totally snug these in, just to rotate the bar. You can move them side to side using those yellow hash marks to make sure that it's in the middle. And then I'm just going to roll the bar back to roughly where it looks like the bars need to be for riding position. And again, we'll fine tune that a little bit later. So as we get these 2 diagonal bolts just snug, hold them in place. Again, making sure that the gap up on the top and the bottom is the same. And we'll put the other 2 bolts in just to make sure everything is in place for now. Again, we'll fine tune all this position towards the end of the assembly. So now we're going to move down to installing the front wheel. So we'll keep our 4mm Allen wrench, and we're going to go down and locate the clamp bolts at the bottom of the fork. And just make sure that each one of these is loose so that we can get the axle out nice and easily. So next we're going to grab our 5mm Allen wrench and we're going to come down to the axle. And on the brake side here, we're just going to give that a turn. And on this model, you can feel the whole axle is spinning. So we're going to go back over to the other side, loosen that cap, and you notice that this one, the cap moves, but the axle is static. We're going to loosen this all the way up until we know that it comes out. And now we're going to put this cap back in, just a couple of threads, so that it's nice and secure, but we still have some distance to go. So what we can do is use this space to push the axle, and you can see that pushed it forward, loosening it here. So we can go ahead and remove the cap now from this side. Set that aside. And then we can work the axle out of the drive side. It's okay if that falls. And we're going to bring this all the way back so it's just out of the way on the inside, on the brake side, so it's easier to get the front wheel on. Next, we'll go ahead and remove this little plastic spacer inside the brake caliper. This is keeping the brake caliper open so that we can roll our wheel into place. Taking off the protective pieces on the wheel, you might have this protective axle piece. We'll go ahead and remove that from the hub. Set that aside. And now with everything clear, we're going to roll the wheel between the fork legs. I like to go down and then come up. And we're going to line up the brake rotor inside of the caliper. Using one hand holding the wheel in place, the other hand will slide the axle all the way through the hub until we see it get to the other side. Once it gets to the other side, you're going to use your dampener leg. And this moves independent. Just going to get that lined up. Push the axle all the way in. We're going to grab our end cap and our tool. We go ahead and thread that back into place. It's very important that you just thread this in till it gets snug. You don't want to over tighten this. If you over tighten it, you could very easily snap that end cap, which is going to render the bike unsafe to ride. So we just want to spin that cap until it's snug and we see it starting to spin the axle on the other side. You don't need to take another wrench and turn them opposingly. You're likely to break something. Just get it nice and snug. What these end caps are designed to do is keep the axle centered between the fork legs. It is the clamp bolts that are actually going to give you that safety and security to keep the axle in place. So with that, we'll grab our 4mm wrench again, come down to our clamp bolts. Now, if you're using a professional style tool with a ball end, you can use the ball end to just drive these down till they're seated. And then we'll switch over to our solid end to actually crank them down. Once we get each bolt seated, we'll go to the other part of our wrench and we'll just go in half turn increments here, and we'll alternate between bolts each time. That way we're getting a nice even clamp on both sides. You'll notice as you tighten one, the other feels a bit looser, and that's why we go back and forth until we're reaching that 8 to 10 Newton meters for each bolt. Now, if you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. 8 to 10 Newton meters is going to be tight, but not overly cranked. So once you get it till both bolts are feeling pretty tight, we're flexing the tool pretty good, then we're in good shape. Go ahead and repeat on both sides. Again, use our ball end to drive the bolts down till they seat. Then using our solid end, we'll alternate half turn at a time between each bolt until both are nice and snug. If you find yourself removing the front wheel quite often for traveling, it's a good idea to add a little bit of thread locker to these clamp bolts periodically to make sure that they stay in place. They are shipped with a little bit of thread locker on them, but like I said, if you find yourself removing the front wheel frequently, it's good to replace that thread locker every so often. Now our front wheel's in place, give it a little spin. Looks like everything's moving just fine. On the left side is your front brake. Give that a squeeze. Everything feels good. So we're going to open up this accessory box. So inside this accessory box, you're going to find your charger, your pedals, and there are some tools for assembly if you don't have a separate set of tools. I'm going to pull out the pedals, remove them from the bubble wrap. Now it's important to take note that there are a specific right and left pedal, and you're going to notice that they are labeled with an R and an L. If you don't see these labels on the pedal for whatever reason, they are also stamped on the end of the spindle. Now the right pedal is going to thread on like normal. The left side is reverse threaded. The best way to think about this is that the pedals always screw on, rotating towards the front of the bike. This is so that when you're actually pedaling the bicycle, you're inherently tightening your pedals rather than loosening them. So first we'll start with the right one. That's going to go on the drive side of the bike. That's the one with all the gears. We're going to go ahead and just start by hand and just very carefully turn that in. And I like to keep turning that by hand until I can't do it with my fingers anymore. The reason is it's very important not to cross thread the crank arm. That can be a very costly repair. Once I've gone as far as I can with my fingers, I'll grab my 15mm open-ended wrench or bicycle pedal wrench and just go ahead and gently turn that until they fully seat. Make sure your tool is nice and aligned. You give it a little crank down at the end. Just like all the rest of the things we've been doing, we want it to be tight, but don't go over cranking on it. You could easily damage it. Go ahead and repeat the process on the left side. Remember that the left side is reverse threaded, but we always rotate it towards the front of the bike in order to tighten. And again, using our 15mm open-ended wrench or pedal wrench, we'll just finish that up ever so slightly. Make sure it's nice and snug. On our Apex models, you can also use a 6mm hex key, and you can go in from the back to attach the pedals as well. So now we're going to take the bike out of the stand, drop it down to the ground to make our final adjustments. So now that we have the bike on the ground, we can go ahead and make the final adjustments to the handlebars. As you can see in this case, our brake levers are kind of pointed towards the sky and our bar roll is not in the right spot. So we're going to grab our 4mm wrench and we're just going to ever so slightly loosen the 4 bolts on the stem cap that hold the handlebars in place. And from here we can again fine tune the center left to right and then also the roll on the bar. Handlebars have an up sweep as well as a back sweep. So what we're looking for on the roll is to make sure that the bars are nice and level to the ground and then make sure that our controls are in the right spot. What we don't want to have is the bars sticking up in the air like a wheelbarrow. We also don't want them to be sticking down towards the ground like an old 1950s cafe racer. We want that bar to be parallel to the ground when we're in a riding position. There are some other customizations you can do, and for more information on that, check out our video on setting up your dashboard. So once we know that our bars are nice and straight in the right centered position, go ahead and use the ball end of our tool and snug up these bolts. Then we'll go to the flat end of the tool and tighten these down to that 6 Newton meters that we want. Now, you don't need a torque wrench for this. 6 Newton meters is snug and tight without, again, over cranking it. It's just a 4mm bolt. It doesn't need to be that tight. In fact, in the event of a crash, we don't want these to be that tight because we want the bars to be able to up out of the way as opposed to being gripped so tightly that there's nothing for them to do but break. So now that we've got everything secured, the bars right, we can see that our brake levers are not exactly in the right position. So we'll start over here on the left side. This is for the front brake. Again, using our 4mm Allen wrench, we're just going to slightly loosen the clamp that's holding the brake lever onto the handlebar. And then we're going to rotate it down to that position of comfort. Typically that's going to be out in front and a little bit down. Again, check out our video on setting up your dashboard for really fine tuning this together. Over here on the right side, you'll need a 4mm for the brake lever clamp, and you'll need a 5mm for your rear shifter. So you'll want to have both of these tools handy. Get those clamps just a little bit loose. Line up the brake lever with the other brake lever. The shifter is going to sit below that, and then we'll finish by tightening the shifter clamp with our 5mm, back to the 4, tighten down our brake lever clamp. Just like with the stem, we want these to be tight so they're not moving, but in the event of a crash, we'd rather have the brake lever move out of the way and you can simply put it back into position rather than being clamped so tightly that the only thing that can happen is the lever breaks. It's a lot easier to take a tool and reposition the lever than it is to replace it. Now we can go ahead and install the battery and test that all the electronic functions are working properly. I'm going to start by putting the kickstand down, leaning the bike down onto the kickstand. Grab the battery, get it out of the packaging. So before we get to the battery, we're going to locate the keys that should be zip tied on the handlebar. Go ahead and clip them off of the handlebars so we have them handy. Now the key is not like an ignition in your car. It is not required to turn the bike on and off. Instead, it goes in the latch for the battery. So we'll put our key into our battery latch, turn towards the front. That's going to unlock the battery latch. Grab our battery out of the packaging, and we're going to locate the 2 different ends. The first end has got our plugs. That's going to go into our electrical system that's down towards the bottom near the motor. On the other end, you have all of our latch function. So this battery is going to install just like an alligator. Going to go in from the bottom and then up to the top. So finding the bottom with those battery slots, we're going to go ahead and slide the battery down in. We're going to feel it click into place down there, and then we'll just bring it up, alligator, and click it into place. To remove the battery, again, keep the key rotated towards the front. We're going to locate the battery release switch. We're going to turn that, and that's going to go in a clockwise position if you're standing behind here. That's going to release the battery so that we can take it out. If for some reason the battery will not go in all the way, more than likely it's because the key is in the lock position. Just go ahead and rotate that forward. The battery clicks into place. We can secure it with the key and remove the key so that the battery is securely inside the bike. This is great for safety and security as well as confidence while you're out on the trail. Now that the battery is installed, we'll go ahead and push and hold the power button. We're going to see the QuietKat logo come up on the screen and the bike will power up. Typically your battery is going to come between 50 and 100% state of charge, so you have enough to test the functionality of the bike. So we've got everything turned on. I can see we're in power mode 1 eco. Everything looks good on the screen. What I'm going to do is with the kickstand down, I'm just going to lean the bike back and I'm going to gently rest the saddle here against my hip. This is going to allow the rear wheel to freely rotate. So in power level 1, we're just going to push on the throttle. We can see the motor spinning. It's moving the rear wheel. Everything's nice and slow, perfectly fine. Now I want to test the shifter. The mechanical gears are going to be on the right side. We're going to go ahead and push the button towards the front of the shifter, and that's going to shift us up in gears. Looks like everything is working just fine. You'll notice there's a slight power cutoff during each shift. That's so that the motor can sense the shift for nice easy gear changes. Now we're just going to make sure that everything shifts and goes into each gear the way it's supposed to. If you're having issues with your shifting, check out our video on adjusting your shifting to make sure you got the cable tension correct. Looks like everything is set and ready to go here. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to go up to power level 2. Make sure there's room in front of me. Again, leaning the bike towards me. I'm going to just spin the pedals and we can see that the motor is engaging, so the pedal assist is functioning properly. One thing to note is when you do squeeze the brake, you are going to cut off the motor's power. So it looks like we got everything dialed in. We encourage you to go from the front to the back, make sure everything is tight, make sure everything is snug, and now we're ready to install our accessories or head out for a ride. For more info, check out quietkat.com, and as always, we'll see you out on the trail.